Yes, it's 50 bucks a last one. And a beautiful line here. Okay. 50 bucks a last one over there.
We good to roll? Okay. Everybody enjoy lunch? Okay. This is the time when everybody starts falling asleep, so I'll try not to. I'm not sure. Can we turn the temperature up a little bit, or? Okay. Okay. Continuing on with the list, calls for area. This is actually from a survey that I did recently in San Bernardino. And the property was based on a description that's the east 10.6 acres of Farm Lot 900. So this is a little bit exaggerated from what Farm Lot 900 really is. But now, in order to punch out the east 10.66 acres, we need to figure out where that line goes relative to the acreage. Do we put it there? Do we put it there? What do we do? Well, there's a little bit of help from way back in 1929. And essentially, the rule of thumb, unless somebody else has done something differently, is that because this says the east 10 acres, we're going to come off the east line and try to hold that parallel. That's the general rule of thumb. You'll find that happens in maybe 20% of the time. But here's a great thing. If you're doing this and you're the first guy in there and you set pipes, you can always file a record of survey and put a note in there that says this is why you did this, and anybody else doing anything further on down the road ought to maintain this in order to preserve the harmony in the neighborhood. We don't require it in California, but Oregon requires something called a surveyor's narrative. And the surveyor's narrative supposedly is a written description of what you did, why you did it. So the next guy who picks it up can look at that map and go, what the? Oh, okay, there it is. So you can put that on maps here in California because we have the right to put anything on there that we want to that's going to amplify our survey or help define what it is that we did. We have the right to do that. So if you're going to do something like this, pass them the message along to the future. Leave footsteps. Quantity descriptions are a real pain in the neck because they're very, very difficult to be able to survey. Because remember, quantity is based on length times width. And now you've got two different measurements in there that you're putzing around with and making multiplying that to come up with the area. So you're getting even less definite. Here's another really recent court case from 1880. Areas are really low down on the list, but they become important when there's nothing else, no superior calls, like the one that we just looked at, the east 10.66 acres. The superior calls leave a lot to be desired, and there's discrepancies there that can be resolved using the areas. Or quantity is the essence of the conveyance in the first place. Because remember, like this one with the farm lot, the point of having a farm lot is you're going to have a farm. And what you're farming is based on, typically on area. You know? How big is your farm? 40 acres. Nobody ever says 325 feet by 877 feet. It's in terms of acreage. So in land that is dealt with in terms of acreage, it becomes very important. The other thing that's really interesting is that when you've got a piece that says east 10.66 acres, land is sold by acreage when it's big chunks of raw ground like that. So the survey to determine exactly where that line goes can be very, very important relative to the amount of money that's going to be paid for that piece of ground. And the quantity must comply with the intention as established by the deed. The other place that's interesting that areas become very important is when you've got descriptions that actually run outside of the area that the grantor actually owned. Because remember, we can't sell what we don't own. So now to help figure out where those lines should fit within the bit that the guy does own, now you can rely on acreage to help amplify that situation and resolve the conflicts in that deed. Calls for coordinates. This is the lowest on the list. This hierarchy was established long before GPS came along. Okay? Basically, they were calculated off stations that coordinates were calculated for. So you've got an imprecise thing that you're making imprecise measurements to come up with an imprecise calculation to move it on it. You're just adding as much error as you possibly can into that. The other thing to remember is, particularly in California, we ain't sat still. We're moving pretty good clip. And, is Marty still here? Oh, good. Contrary to certain government agencies, we do not move in a uniform fashion altogether. We move periodically, very spastically. We have these things called earthquakes. My heartbreak with the PRC is that in order to be able to establish a basis of bearings and to use coordinates, state plane coordinates on a map, you are required by the PRC to take the beautiful observations, my 4 hours worth of occupation times that I post-processed and got residuals down in the millimeter level, and move them back in time using a program called HDDP, which is a linear regression program. So I'm going to take my nice shiny coordinates and move them back in a straight line to a point in time that I know never existed. Those points were never there because that land didn't go like this. It went. So, yes?
There's a way around the PRC, and Marty is the one who told me how.
Okay.
I was having these difficulties, and we both agreed that if we didn't say California coordinates, if we said NAD83, that you were free and clear.
What's the definition of California state plane coordinates?
It's when you
NAD83.
It's when you call it state plane. When you call it California state plane coordinates. Not,
There's another way around it too.
yeah.
Unless you're required to report it in state plane coordinates. You can grab your state plane coordinates and grab, like we used to in the old days, 2 found monuments of a previous record or survey, yank them back and pop them on there and use that for your basis of bearings. Say, sorry.
Oh, it's a good use for coordinates.
Mhm.
Generally, when I'm doing work, we have, coordinates, found monument, coordinates XYZ,
Mhm.
XY, excuse me, thence, other found monument, coordinates XY,
Mhm.
and off you go and tie in maybe at the other end if it's a long enough survey.
Yep.
More
Yeah.
coordinates. It helps the guy coming behind you find what you're looking for. You can go out there with
Yeah.
his GPS and dig.
Yeah, and if you're going to do that, I would say throw in the Z too, because if I go out there and I'm looking at the Z and going, right, I'm right on her coordinate, but crap, I'm 50 feet lower. Oh, maybe there's an excavation here. Riverside County particularly requires, as part of the description of the monument, is found 1-inch iron pipe down 8/10. So the next poor bugger comes along, he knows he's going to have to dig at least at 8/10 to find that, assuming that the ground level is still the same thing. That's a really good idea. It gives some more information to help find the monument. The other thing about coordinates is you think property owners have hard times trying to figure out our maps with bearings and distances on them today. Throw coordinates on there too. So this is a political statement.
Well, not only that, when you give them a coordinate, now all of a sudden they think they can set their Garmin to
Oh yeah.
set their Garmin to that coordinate and, well, no, this is it, I don't need to.
Yeah. I remember the first time I had a call from a client. I don't think much of your work. What do you mean? Well, I was out there with my handheld. Well, I can't get within 6 feet of what you did. Like, oh, okay. Tell you what, go back out there right now, put a paint spot on where you think it ought to be. Go out tomorrow morning and put a paint spot on where it's telling you ought to be then, and give me a call. He calls up the next morning and goes, man, I got taken to the cleaners. This thing's a piece of junk. Like, no. What are you holding there? Well, it's this Garmin. I bought it at Walmart. It is a reconditioned thing. I paid $79 for it. I paid $48,000 for mine, and I know how to use it. Because that was a cool thing about Caltrans. When I was at Caltrans, I used GPS equipment a lot, and they bought Trimble training for me. Trimble classes were typically 8 hours a day, 5 days. I think I got about 7 weeks of training, 7 different courses with Trimble through the state of California. So, with all due respect, put that up against your little Garmin handheld and a user's manual. I think we're missing a slide in there, but cardinal rules for the interpretation of deeds. You'll run into a lot of the old deeds that talk about north X chains, east X chains, south X change. Those cardinal directions really don't necessarily mean north 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds east. North is sometimes just north-erly-ish, sort of. And don't get confused with that lovely little chart that says, from here to here it's north, and from here to here it's northeast. Because sometimes they don't fit mathematically like that. It's just a locative idea. It's a way to get there, hopefully.
Why did it turn into a lawsuit?
I'm not sure because I haven't read that case, but hey, tell you what, pull the case, read it, and come back and report to us next year when you're at the conference as a PLS. Extrinsic evidence. Extrinsic evidence is anything that comes from outside the deed. Theoretically, the rule of thumb is that we are supposed to work within the 4 corners of the deed. That means that from the front sheet to the back sheet, that's what we're supposed to use for the interpretation of that deed. Sometimes, if there is a conflict, we need to use extrinsic evidence as long as it doesn't throw everything else into disrepute. There might be certain cases where extrinsic evidence is absolutely required. AIDS. It may be that the original copies of the deeds, there's something illegible there, particularly if you're using a handheld or a handwritten description from the 1860s. And I understand that cursive writing is going out of fashion for being taught in school. So my youngest son has some learning disabilities. He's never been able to learn to tell time using the watch with the hands on it. So I see a day very soon when young surveyors are going to pick up a deed and go, huh? Extrinsic evidence can also explain what's happening. For example, we've got a description that says the west bank of the San Joaquin River as it exists on a particular date. Chances are that that river is not there anymore, but that deed was written specifically to that point and that date. Now we've got a whole lot of mess to do to find out where that river was on that date. That's proper application of extrinsic evidence that helps us get to that bank. Nothing in our extrinsic evidence can refute anything in the deed. All we can use is extrinsic evidence to amplify what's in the deed or to figure out what's going on with it.
Well, if you're looking at a chain of title and it occurs to you that there's been a scrivener's error somewhere along the line,
Yep.
that would be extrinsic
Yep.
to the deed.
Yeah.
not refute.
Yeah, you go back through the chain of title and you're looking at the deed from 1953 and comparing that to the deed from 1928, and you're going, whoa, different direction. Fix. And it happens all the time. That's why when you're pulling up deeds and chains of title, one of the things to ask for is the first deed that created that parcel, as well as the current vesting deed. And that's sometimes called a cutting deed or a first deed or creation deed or whatever, depending on who the title company is. But if you've got a deed that you're looking at that's an old deed, like in the 50s or whatever, really do yourself a favor and get the first deed and compare them. Because it's amazing how much those suckers change. So the next part of what we're going to deal with is simultaneous conveyances, which, incredibly, actually means conveyances that happen all at once, simultaneously. So we call them simultaneous conveyances. We're not really all that imaginative when it comes to naming things. I mean, sequential conveyance, simultaneous conveyance, we're just trying to get across the idea. So what is a simultaneous conveyance? Well, there's more than that. Several parcels created at the same time, and we'll get into an interesting definition of that, by the same person or persons, because we can't have multiple different people creating the parcels, through the same instrument, sort of, where all parcels have equal standing. That means that there are no junior or senior rights. We're creating them all at the same time. Dink. At the same time. There's an interesting presumption at law that at the same time doesn't necessarily mean at the same time. Because if you're subdividing a parcel into, let's say, 6 parcels prior to March 4 of 1972, then we could actually prepare 6 separate legal descriptions and file them one right after the other. The court looks at that and says they're all created at the same time because it's just a crapshoot as to which one got recorded first. Doesn't matter, they're all created at the same time. And that's a very important presumption at law. For example, if you and your significant other are traveling somewhere and you're in a car accident, and your significant other is killed outright, and you linger in the hospital for 89 days before you pass, the law says you died at the same time in the same car accident. So the same time doesn't necessarily mean the same time that we talk about when we're talking about at the same time, okay? So that's something to keep in mind here. You can have a series of deeds that create a sequential conveyance, even though they're not all recorded with the exact same time. And there are a number of court cases as to how far apart those recordings can be.
Wait, you mean they can have it simultaneous?
You can have a simultaneous conveyance that's a couple of days apart. If you can prove that the intent was to get the thing, both parcels created and sold, for whatever reason, you just couldn't get the second deed into the recorder in time. Because remember, we're a quasi-race state. What that means is that unless there's some other bit of evidence that comes along that proves the opposite, the first deed recorded is the more important one. Sort of. Okay. You don't have, as we talked about, unwritten rights. Okay. You don't have to have something in writing to be able to have it be important. So you could have 2 deeds that were created. One of them is recorded today, and the other one we don't record for whatever reason until next month. But they were written on the same date. The grantor or whatever recorded it on or signed them on the same date, but something happened with the recording. So we've got evidence that these things were supposed to have happened at the same time, but may not have happened in record time. So you've got to read the whole thing in the deed. You can't just look at the description and go, I've got this. Not necessarily. Depends upon what you're dealing with as far as public lands. You might have one township that was surveyed in 1860, and the township right next door wasn't surveyed until 1914. So you get a section breakdown over here and a section breakdown over there, and then, they're clearly you got 54 years difference there. It'd be hard to say, yeah, they're done at the same time. Completion surveys are another example. Okay. Simultaneously created parcels are created by final maps. There is no such thing as a tract map in California. The legal definition is final map, but everybody calls them tract maps. In the old days, they actually used to be called little maps and big maps, or minor maps and major maps. Well, no, an official map is something entirely different. Read the definition of official map in the back end of the Subdivision Map Act. The official map was actually created by the city surveyor or the county surveyor at the request of the Board of Supervisors or the city council to do a specific thing, which is the official map that they're talking about in 8762 of the PLS Act when they're talking about any parcel that's shown on a record of survey, final map, parcel map, or official map. An assessor's plat is not an official map, contrary to some belief. Simultaneous parcels are also created by parcel maps and carefully crafted deeds. Final maps are governed by the part of the Government Code, Subdivision Map Act, which final maps is 66433 to 66443. That's the specific requirements for the final map. Parcel maps, think the section right after that, 66444 to 66450. Think. Carefully created deeds are covered by a whole lot of things. Fundamental principles of sequential or simultaneous conveyances are that, number one, like everything else, you can't subdivide or convey anything that you don't own. And the boundaries of the subdivision as a whole rely on the subdivision lines from older maps, more old maps. And you might have a subdivision that is a simultaneous creation of parcels, but the subdivision itself has junior or senior rights that you're dealing with the exterior boundary on it. There are essentially two classes of maps: protracted maps and monumented maps. Protracted maps are lots that are really, for want of a better word, paper maps, where there's nothing interior. You're just going by stuff on the exterior and measuring back into what's there on the maps. They're a pain in the butt because we're relying on measurement, and hopefully the measurement today matches the measurement previously. And it's kind of like the mapped version of a description that goes north, bearing, distance, 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 without any calls. And if you think about it, a map that has monuments on it, you've now got calls to the monument, just like in the deeds. Just like everything else, if you can absolutely prove that the map is in error, or what's on the ground is in error, then you have a case for doing something different. This is an interesting mess because, as most of us know, we go out and do the boundary survey, take all the information back into the office, and the guys in the office create the parcel map or the subdivision map. Then after the map is recorded, or just before it's recorded, we go back out to the field and set the monuments for all the lots based on the map. Most of the time. That one pretty well stands for itself. So you're out there and you're looking at a parcel. For the most part, you don't get the right to change or fix the lines because you think they're in the wrong place, particularly when there are owners who have relied on the physical monumentation. Not too long ago, I recorded a parcel map in Riverside County in which the east line of the parcel we were subdividing in two pieces was theoretically mapped at perpendicular to the south line. Well, in the field, the north line was on a curve. In the field, we found that the monument that was set in some of the hardest caliche I think I've ever seen, it may as well have been poured in concrete, but it was set 5 degrees around, exactly 5 degrees around the curve. So something was going on screwy there, and they went through a lot of whatever. They went through a lot of effort to put that pipe in where it belonged. Well, the original parcel map, the two lots on the west side were both exactly 5 acres, and they were on a funny curved street. So there's a lot of work to get those to be exactly 5 acres. The next two parcels, the map shows them as slightly smaller than 5 acres and slightly bigger than 5 acres. But when you looked at where that pipe was, you now had two parcels that were exactly 5 acres. Add on to that the fact that there was a fence, an old fence that ran up that line as it was monumented. Add on to that there was a garage that was built that was at 10 feet off that line. So that if you actually ran perpendicular to the south line, you'd be picking up the corner of that garage. So we turned around and said to Brian, geez, I'm holding the pipe. And Brian said, can you do anything else? So we had 2.5 acre subdivision that on the map could not have been subdivided. Based on the field, was subdivided. No, absolutely not. There was no way that monument could have been disturbed. It was a 1-inch pipe with a concrete plug and a brass tag. And the surveyor, Gary Akers' partner, Musser, Randy Musser. If any of you follow behind Randy Musser's work in the past, if you miss Randy's measurements, get your stuff checked because there's something wrong with your gun. So that was a case where there's just too much evidence there. It was clearly not disturbed. We had fences there, we had old garages there, everything all led to the same thing. There was just a screw up in the drafting of the map, I think.
We have one similar to that where there's redwood hubs,
Mm-hmm.
block corners, which suck to find.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually gone. But we found them on the north line of this. Client said, "We want this." The south line, I think, is in the wrong spot because the neighbor keeps giving me hassle about it. So we look at it. North line, I dig down 12 inches or whatever. I find remnants of redwood hub.
Yep.
So they're there, right?
Yep.
We're excited. We go to the south east corner, and here's a redwood hub sticking up.
Mm-hmm.
Sticking up out of the ground.
Very common.
Painted white. Well, that's what the original monuments were.
Mm-hmm.
But every other redwood hub I've ever found out there, ever, has always been chopped off underneath the ground about 8 to 12 inches.
Yeah.
So we start scratching our head like, why is this one, the term I like to use, this monument's not of the same character
Right.
as the others.
Right.
And so then and then it also so happens that he had an extra 5 feet encroachment on the south line. So then we started really scratching our head going, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what's going on here? But the county surveyor came back and said, well, is that an original monument?
Might be, might not be. There's a whole lot else there. Most of the time when I find ancient redwood hubs, they're chopped off at the top and they're sticking up out of the ground, 1/10 or 2. The reason they're chopped off at the top is because mostly, if they're set out in brush areas, they've been burned. And as the ground has done whatever, the redwood hub sort of sticks up out of it. So you get this irregularly chopped off hub that all the ash the charring has been washed off, or most of it's been washed off. That way you know you're really dealing with an ancient hub, too. Again, original, as you're talking about, original set monuments control, unless you've got some other idea that this doesn't look the same as all the rest of these original monuments. Now, this is where you kind of get into senior rights with simultaneous conveyances, because we've got this big parcel here that's been subdivided up, and that's the easterly boundary that's shown on the plat. For whatever reason, somebody comes in after you and finds the two original monuments that are supposed to be that boundary line. Oops. Under the presumption that you can't sell what you don't own, like the Brooklyn Bridge, you can't subdivide or convey what's over that originally monumented line. Now, the other presumption here is the poor buggers on the east end there are the ones who are going to get screwed because we place the error where it occurs. We don't spread it across the rest of the excuse me, the rest of the subdivision. This is something you see all the time. As long as the grantor, you can't construe against the grantor as long as it's a non-government agency. It's like, okay, well, you can't get adverse possession against the government. Actually, that's not true. It can be done. Because the government holds property in two forms, and this is something to really consider. The government holds property in trust for the people, and it owns property in name of the corporation, whatever that corporate entity is. Riverside County Flood. They have flood channels that they're holding in trust for the people. You're going to have a really hard time getting an encroachment on there. But Riverside County Flood also has different maintenance yards around that property is typically held in title by Riverside County Flood, like property held by Ian Wilson. That can, in certain circumstances, be pushed into sort of an adverse possession. The BLM also has instituted intelligent understanding of the situation in that they now have a whole body of procedures that they call small boundary adjustments, small line adjustments, small holding adjustments, where they sit back and go, you know, this cabin's been here for 60 years and it's encroaching on the south line of our national forest land, so you know we'll enter into an agreement here and we won't screw up title badly because it's not that big a deal.
Do you think of any references regarding where adverse possession has succeeded against a publicly owned chunk of property?
Off the top of my head, I can't, but it's just because I can't remember the references. But you look at, I'm not sure, but I know of a couple of cases in San Diego County. I can't remember the names of the cases, but they've been hammered.
Sorry.
Doesn't the BLM use that same process to deal with bona fide rights and stuff like that as well?
Well, if you got a bona fide right, that means that you predate the federal situation there, so that wouldn't be under an agreement. It would be recognizing your bona fide rights. All right. So with simultaneous conveyances, we don't have to worry about junior-senior rights, but when we've got errors in measurements or we've got discrepancies in measurements, we now have to deal with something called proration. Fundamental principles of proration are really pretty straightforward. You're going to prorate only between undisturbed original monuments or their replacements, their pedigreed replacements, and not between something that you're not going to accept as an undisturbed or a replacement. Most of the time, exact widths of streets are most of the time granted to the government. Because remember, that street is really being turned over to the people. It's our right to pass on that road or whatever. So if you've got a monument that's a foot and a half inside the right-of-way line, you're not going to hold that right-of-way, that monument as being the right-of-way line. You're going to treat it like a closing corner. And the dedicated street is going to get the dedicated width for that. Reason being, again, we want to keep harmony in the neighborhood. Otherwise, the right-of-way lines would keep doing this every time a new surveyor came in. We can't do that. We've got to hold something solid. And in this case, the people's rights to pass supersedes everything else.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
What if the county does not accept the streets, but they still become, they essentially are private streets in that subdivision?
Mhm.
Then, because it is essentially not gone into the public, or it is not my street as well, do we still hold that for use of the people?
Yeah.
That are within it?
Yeah, typically, and most of the language has changed recently, and what it says is we accept the right-of-way, or we vest the right-of-way in the name of the people, but we are not accepting the street until y'all build it to our requirements. So what that's saying is, we're taking the rights to the land, you build the road, and we will come, but not until. Because we don't want to get stuck accepting the whole road and then having the developer go bankrupt and having to build streets.
We run into where there's a lot of paper streets because of
Yep.
this. They've never been accepted.
Yep.
From wherever, but so until they become accepted into the county, do the owners on each side own to the center, or are those paper streets that are at 60?
Owners always own to the center, unless there's some other.
Is the use available out to the 60 feet, or whatever was on the plat?
If the road hasn't been built,
Yeah.
I wouldn't. What I would counsel my client is the road hasn't been built yet. You have use of your entire property. But remember, if they come along and build the road, your wall may have to come down at your expense. Now, on the other hand, I can take you to a lovely paper street that, in order to shoot the monuments, and it was all monumented, we had to rope in and climb down the cliff. It's over in the northwest corner, northeast of Vale Lake. Here's something really important. When you're dealing with simultaneous conveyances, you really do not want to push outside the blocks that are created by the simultaneous conveyance, even if you've got a conveyance that has a number of blocks in there, because you want to keep the error where the error occurred, okay? And we'll go through this as an example, and just a simple plat here. I don't know if you have much experience looking at old maps, but this kind of configuration here, come on, that implies that all of these lots along here are also 50 feet, okay? And it implies that the depth of all of these lots is supposed to be 100 feet. And of course there we've got the widths of the street. And on a lot of the old maps, you'll just see the entire width, not the half width. You just assume that the half width is that divided by 2. It's not that tough a calculation. You can actually do that on an HP. Let's say we're going to survey for the boundaries of this parcel. We find that corner, that corner, that corner, that corner, and that corner. That's all we've got. That's actually pretty good. Yeah, you're having a really good day. Now, remember we said you can't prorate prorate outside the block, but I'm going to use this. This really becomes a really cool deal to be able to establish this line across here. You're not prorating here, you're just establishing the line between those two original found monuments. Because remember, the idea here is you didn't have a street that went like this. It was supposed to go straight across there. Okay, so we're going to establish this the corners for this property right here. One of the first things I'd probably do is hit this one. Now, you ain't going to be prorating much in here because there isn't anything to prorate because we prorate between Mr. Johnson. However, you can extend that line south because it's supposed to be the west line of the block, and you can extend this west because it's supposed to be the south line of the block, and where those 2 points come together, bingo. Oh, I went for that one instead, sorry. Okay, so we got this one set. We'll get back to that in a minute. This one here, we are going to prorate across here. Actually, what we're going to do is set this thing 80 feet over here from this one. We're not even going to prorate anything. From there to there, that's 80 feet. Bingo. Okay, we might go a little further. We could establish this line by prorating here. Now, whatever our measurement is here, we're going to use that measurement based, compare that to the record measurement, 100, 200, 350 feet, to come up with a position for that one. That kind of helps us get this line here. This one, this is going to be pretty easy because from this point to this point, this ought to fall right in the middle, which is actually a proration when you think about it, but hey. So now we've established that. Now we can set this one in the midpoint between these two. We can set this one at the intersection here. And we can set this one midpoint between these two. Remember, proration is a last resort. We only prorate when there's not a damn thing else we can do, which is why we prorated to establish this point, and then for this corner here, we intersect here. Okay? So now we've set all the corners for this piece of property here. We're good to go. We walk away from this, right? Well, I have a real hard time with guys who do that. Because now, even if I file a corner record, or even if I file a record of survey, and all I've got are these 4 points set here, these are just what in Northern California they call dimension points. So all I've got is this. Next poor bugger along is going to survey here. He's going to try to recreate everything from my 4 points here, 100 feet by 50 feet by 100 feet by 50 feet. Even if he's freaking perfect, any error I've got is going to get amplified by the error in his survey. So now we are going to force that neighborhood to be in chaos. There is something that you can do as a licensed surveyor who has integrity, leaving footsteps for those who come after us. Set the intersection points of the street. You've just got enough information here to be able to figure that out. File your record of survey with that. Oh, no, you're taking on so much liability. Really? If you get this map, that's my map, and you go out and find those 4 corners, those 4 points at the intersections of those streets, are you going to go, let's see if this works? We're going to spend 3 days recreating this record of survey. Or are you going to go, thank God? Think about that for a minute.
But the problem is how that relates to the outside boundaries.
Well, that is the, I've done all of this work here. I can establish these points pretty easily. Okay? That is the outside boundary.
To the other blocks.
I'm not pushing anything into the other blocks. I'm not surveying these blocks around here. I'm surveying this block here. You want to deal with something in this block? Go ahead and use these. Stick them, put your own monuments in down there. But usually, the argument that you'll get for not doing this is that you're taking on incredible liability. My response to that is bullshit. Excuse me, bullshit. I'm actually reducing my liability because very seldom is the next guy along there likely to spend his client's money needlessly just to try to prove me wrong. And by doing this, he can prorate back in and establish the corners of this lot really easily. So now I'm leaving big footsteps and promoting harmony in this neighborhood. Harmony. There's an old John song about that. So, the one thing to understand about boundary is that the answer is very rarely in the math. There's mathematics in the understanding and the analysis of the evidence. But as Chuck Willis used to tell me, you can math the hell out of it. But if you're on the wrong line, you're on the wrong line. The emphasis of this whole thing is making sound decisions based on defensible principles that we've talked about. Even if you go against those things, you now have an idea of what the principle is, and you can turn around and say, but in this case it doesn't apply because. And if you can support that, you're flying. But it takes understanding the underlying principles, supported by established laws, and both statute law and case law. Now, we actually have absolutely not a clue what this exam is going to look like. And I apologize for that. So there isn't really any sets of problems that I can put up here that's going to help you really understand what's going to happen with the exam. What I did do is try to come up with some multiple choice sort of things based on my experience with the Colorado exam and the way it's put together that you might see that are pretty tough types of multiple choice questions. Brown owns Lot 8. The record dimensions are 100 foot east-west and 300 foot north-south. Brown to black in 29. All of Lot 8 except the west 50 feet. There's your survey. Question is, how wide is black's lot? Those are your choices.
B.
All those in favor of A, raise their hands. Good. We got that concept. All those in favor of B? All those in favor of C? Remember, the exception is senior. So Mr. Black is going to get everything that's left over except. Same situation. You knew that was going to happen.
B. B too.
Anybody in favor of A? B, C, D? All those in favor of A? All those in favor of B? C? D?
Wait, whoa, back up. He conveyed the east half of lot 8?
Let's see, Brown's Lot 8, recommendations,
Otherwise, I'm gonna
conveys,
say it's 26 feet.
conveys a portion of black and the west 50 feet. Conveys the east half in 32.
Did he convey the east half of lot 8? Is that what we're assuming? Or is it the east half of what he owns? Because
It's none of the above.
Brown owns lot 8.
Right.
Brown conveys Junior and gets the remainder.
26 feet is going to get answered.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, best
He gets
answer.
his tab. I think it's A. This lot goes to him, so.
Did you follow where I was going there?
Pardon?
Did you follow where I was going?
Yeah. Well, you were talking about a strip 2 feet wide in there. Remember what we talked about with strips?
No. I'm talking about, did Brown convey to White the east half of the remainder? Or the east half of
Okay,
lot
I'm
8?
sorry. That should be the east half of Lot 8.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. You're right, that's a good point.
Otherwise-
Excellent. There's a fix to the slide.
Devil's in the details.
Yeah, that's good.
It is, you're right.
Question based on the information you're giving.
Well, there wasn't enough information given there, but that's a very good point. Yeah, it should be, construe this as be the conveyances are of Lot 8. So, remember, it's a bigger lot than normal, or than we thought it was. Black got the west 50 feet. That's all he gets. White gets whatever is left over, so he's going to get that excess. This is when it comes in good that the junior parcel, if you're the junior owner, if the lot is bigger than originally thought, you get the excess. If it's shorter, you get the non-excess. This I ran into in Colorado. And they would give you this little scenario and give you 4 statements after it, and then they would give you 5 answers. And basically what they're saying is which of these 5 answers whole is correct. And what happens is you start looking at this going, well, I know 1 is useless. 2 is kind of like,
That's not true.
I'm not sure. No, I'm just giving an example. 3, I have no idea about. Oh, crap. So this is the kind of multiple choice test that you really do need to know the answer to. This is not just one of those I can toss out 1 or 2 points or 1 or 2 of these and get to a 50-50 shot. Okay, so looking at this, what are these statements is actually true? Is there a call to a monument there?
No.
Okay, so
You're not calling a.
According to Waddles, that's a lot. That is a monument.
yeah, well, have you ever followed Waddle's work? Yeah. You would call that an adjoiner before you would call it a monument. Because remember, a monument is a physical thing, like the ocean or the mountains or the 1-inch pipe.
Well, according to Waddles, once the west line of something is called out, that becomes a monument.
It's an adjoiner. And Mr. Waddles, by the way, is not what you will be tested on. It's an opinion. Oh. You people have, more than likely, Curtis Brown's book. What is it, 5th edition that you're working with? 6th? Okay. This is the first Wiley & Sons edition. Kurt Brown, when he taught at Mesa College, couldn't find a single boundary textbook that was worth a damn that he wanted to use in his class. So he wrote his own, and it was Boundary Control and Legal Principles for California. And it's actually a stapled booklet, really. And I thought I'd put one in. I actually have a copy of that, and I believe it is actually one that Kurt himself owned. It came to me as did this from Bud Oozes. By the time you get to the 4th edition, the other authors had much more influence than Mr. Brown did. If you compare your 6th edition to this, you will find that there are discrepancies. If you can, do yourself a favor and get a copy of the 3rd edition. It was the last one that Kurt had a lot of input on. A couple of other books. Clark on Boundary. Skelton on Properties and Boundaries and Adjacent Properties. Great books. Waddles, great book. Compare them. Conflicts. What do we go with? State law. Not one of these has any higher importance than state law or case law. Okay? These are great books, and they should be on your reference shelves.
Title of the second one?
This one is Clark on Boundaries.
Latest edition's red, I think.
Is it?
What was the third one?
This one is Skelton on Boundaries and Adjacent Properties. Fun to read. But again, like Waddles, there are conflicts between each of those three, and boundary is an extremely fact-driven exercise. The facts of one boundary change to the next boundary, and I'm not kidding. Not necessarily in smaller pieces, but in larger pieces of ground, you can do a survey of this one this year, come up with a boundary determination for that, and come back and do the survey of the one next to it next year, and there's a different set of facts that you're dealing with this one. And it's amazing. That's one of the really cool things about boundary surveying and surveying in general. I'm ADD. I get bored really quickly. I've been doing this for pushing for 25 years now. I'm 24 years. You know, if something can keep somebody with ADD's interest for that long, this is really a cool profession.
Is there anything in the statute for California or Nevada that states what they consider a monument?
What?
I
I'm
was taught the same thing as he was. That
actually, as far as any of that, you're going to have the coded section relative to what's going on, the hierarchy. Monument in California is really defined. The statement is about durable monuments. Contrary to the opinion of the city of Sacramento, a durable monument is not a quarter-inch PK.
just the choice of the answers out there, the answer's going to be E.
Yeah, but you already saw this.
Well, no, because
But yes,
even if you say that Waddle is called to a senior line as a monument, or the adjoiner,
yeah,
as a monument, it doesn't matter because 2 and 3 are going to be answered.
that's actually a good point. So yeah, even if you say 1 and 2 and 3 are all correct, 4 is ridiculous. The only one along the bottom here that has the best answer is Bada Bingo. Yeah.
Just out of argument's sake, if 298 feet was 6,000 feet to 3 Highway 395, isn't that ambiguous? I mean,
No.
the line of the call, right?
Yeah. Well, to the west line, yeah, but 298 feet to the west line of green, you're not going to have something ambiguous there. It doesn't matter about the dimension, just like in that example. The distance doesn't matter. You're going that bearing to a particular place, the west line of green.
Did you say
The adjoiner,
the distance is informative and
exactly, to the west line of green is the locative point, yeah.
this looks fine.
Yeah, it does, a little bit. So now, how would we establish this point?
On line 280,
Yeah, intersection of the two lines.
Now, couldn't that be incorrect because you have the 60-foot roadway and they're gonna get there?
That's why I threw this in. Because that's 301.
Then you hold the 60 the same.
Yeah. So this one, instead of being an intersection, now you would actually hold the line and come 60 feet north to set the point.
So you wouldn't use E and F as a line? It would be an acre.
Probably not in this case because I want to make sure that the street gets the full 60-foot width. Pardon?
I'm sorry, just like your other example that you had.
Yeah, except the other one, we didn't have anything on the south end here, so all we had left over was to intersect.
You better check across the street to make sure
Yep,
that there's not something there that could hold that.
that's right. In this case, well, actually, in this case, you're going to have to establish this point first.
Right.
Now, you're going to prorate between this point and something down here. What are we going to pick? That's right. Now, if E were just, instead of being 1-inch iron pipes here, let's say this is just a chiseled cross. Actually, what I would do is take measurements all the way down the street of anything like driveways, fences, walls, anything along there, and try to figure out which one of these prorations, this one or this one, fit the improvements best. Because the argument that I could make then is if it fit this, even if this is a chiseled cross, if it fit this really well, I'd probably say for some reason or other this was a chiseled cross instead of a 1-inch iron pipe. Okay?
So that could have been like, we have granite, you can't set it like,
Yeah, exactly.
but then the chisel starts getting wider and wider.
Yeah. Suggestions? Well, we're definitely going to set it on the line between B and C because B and C are original found monuments. So,
Then you give the 60 prorate.
Establish the block corner and then prorate between B and the block corner.
exactly. Okay. Just to tackle these really quickly, lot line adjustments. Lot line adjustments are
Pretty hip on that technology.
oh yeah.
Steve Jobs would be proud.
No one would ever confuse me with a technophobe.
Did you say that lot line adjustments are same sort of subject as mergers?
Come on.
Are they simultaneous conveyances?
Why am I not getting anywhere? There we go. .66412. This division, meaning 66412, shall be inapplicable to any of the following. There's all 6 sentences of 66412D.
I don't see any period 6 sentences.
Pardon? Yeah. This is the new version because a lot line adjustment between 4 or fewer existing adjoining parcels, which is really kind of interesting. Because the question that has been raised
adjoining to the original or adjoining to the adjoining?
yeah. Is that adjoining to that one?
Right.
So does it mean I can't do a lot line adjustment across those 4 parcels? We don't know. We don't know. Most jurisdictions say yes, but I'll bet there's more than one that says no.
So you're saying that if you wanted to adjust the interior boundaries of the 2 outside lots,
You could, in some jurisdictions, you could have a problem.
they wouldn't let you do it? They'd make you do 2 separate lot line adjustments, one for this set and one for this one?
Possibility.
Yeah, I could see it.
Now, the whole kicker here is that you're not going to create more parcels at the back end than you had going in the front end. Because if you create more parcels, you're subdividing. If you're adjusting, you don't have any more at the back end than you had going in. You can have less because you can do a merger. In fact, some agencies use the lot line adjustment as a merger, and basically what they say is you're adjusting this line, the common line, and making it coincident with this other line over here, so there's nothing in between anymore.
We call it parcel map waiver sometimes.
Okay, yeah, that's been suggested, and quite frankly, a parcel map is a really cool way to do a lot line adjustment, except for, where is it here? No parcel map shall be required as a condition to the approval of the lot line adjustment. So in your jurisdiction, you tell me I have to do a parcel map, I tell you no, I can't. Because if I did, I would be violating the Subdivision Map Act. Anybody familiar with 66499.32? Penalty for subdivided
$250.
not even close.
Times 3,000.
1 year, up to 1 year in county jail and or $10,000 fine.
Wow. Now, doesn't that include state prison? It's not just.
Yeah, yeah, it does, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a felony. So, they actually have a separate wing at Pelican Bay for Subdivision Map Act violators. They keep those guys away from the general population because those are the really hardened criminals. But yes, I would tell you no, and if you really push that, I would tell you, okay, get the police chief or the county sheriff, take us away. You're forcing me to do an illegal act. I think that a parcel map is probably, once we've got some things ironed out, the way that we'll end up with.
Parcel map waiver.
Waiver, or parcel map or the parcel map waiver, either one of them. We're going to do a lot line adjustment. You can't force me to do that.
This was intended to be a low-cost means of, say, moving out lines between neighbors. A parcel map is not cheap.
A record of survey was intended to be a low-cost way of getting information into the public record. How much does your boy charge? Oh, more than that.
What about that line underneath there, it says, no record of survey shall be required for a lot line adjustment unless required by section 8762?
Yep,
You set money, so
yep.
Okay.
if they want to adjust the line, they want money to set, then you got to follow it.
City of Paso Robles got 2 lot line adjustments going on there. They told me I have to file a record of survey. I said, really? They said, oh, that's state statute. This is a city ordinance. And I actually had the city attorney tell me, our city ordinance trumps the state statute. This is a guy with a friggin' JD. As a JD, he has a PhD in law. That's what JD means, Juris Doctorate. It's like, are you kidding me? Unfortunately, my client didn't have deep pockets and wasn't interested in doing the lawsuit, because all we'd had to have done is gone to court and asked for what's called a writ of mandamus, which basically is telling the government what to do. Incidentally, every case that I can find so far, and there's none of them that's gone to the appellate, so it's really just people being kind enough to send me comments about the Superior Court decisions. Every single time that a local jurisdiction has been yanked into court requesting a writ of mandamus, if the writ has been given, the court has also awarded the filer costs. Attorney's costs, filing costs, court costs. They're not giving them costs for the delay of the project, but it's a case of you really, as an agency, you really run the risk of not only getting told, do your job, but you run the risk of being told, and pay his attorney and our court costs.
Our county ordinance requires that you have exhibit map, the county surveyor stamp, as well as the legal description being stamped by the county surveyor. I mean, not county surveyor, by the surveyor who did it.
Yeah.
But it never goes through county surveyor review, so
Yep.
in Public Works, my job is to confirm that the exhibit map and the legal description represent each other.
Yes.
Or in union. But I have no way to know whether that survey that the land surveyor went out and did, and whether what he did, or if it is technically correct. Anything, there's no requirements beyond that. Is it necessarily, does it need to go to a parcel map requirement, or is it potentially something that lot line adjustments can still?
I would like to see lot line adjustments stay relatively simple. But number one, you don't have to go to the field for a lot line adjustment. It doesn't require a survey. Some agencies make a slide around that by saying, you've got to develop property here. We want you to show that the new lot line isn't going to affect the zoning laws or the building setbacks. Yeah. 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 Remember, the lot line adjustment is not an end run around the Subdivision Map Act. It's a legal process. It's defined in law. It is specifically exempted because you're about, if you're doing a lot line adjustment, you're about to perform an illegal act. Okay. Yeah. We're going to create an illegal parcel of land. We're not going to use a parcel map or a final map. We're actually going to create a piece of land that doesn't meet zoning by itself. And we're going to stick it on another parcel. Remember, and this is kind of the mind blower, and I love doing it because it does blow minds. We have 2 parcels of land. This one is owned by my brother. This one is owned by his next door neighbor, Brian. Alan buys, my brother, buys a boat. Alan being Alan can't just buy a boat. He's got to buy an $80,000 bass boat. He can't get the damn thing down the side of the house. He and Brian get together, and Alan and Brian fish together. They're great buddies. Brian says, hell, let's just move the line over, move the fence, get the boat down there. So they call me. Hey, big brother, what do we do?
You say, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Kurt Brown once told me that one of the things about being a professional is that you are obligated, because of the license that you're given, to give answers. Doesn't mean you have to do a full job. But if somebody comes and asks your opinion, you're obligated by the fact that the people of California gave you your license to make your living. I don't care who they are. I have, in fact, before we leave, make sure that you have my email address. What do we go to? 3? Shit. Okay. This is all lowercase. That's my email address. That's com at the end, cardno.com. There are a lot of guys who call me and say, crap, I've got myself into this situation. Can I take a little bit of your time? I will never turn anyone down who comes to me like that, for a simple reason. I went to people like Vin Sinchek, Michael Palmieri, Kurt Brown, Chuck Willis, Bill Hofferber. Said, crap, I got myself in a heap of trouble. And they pulled me out. And as Chuck Willis says, I don't owe him anything. I owe my debt to the people who are coming behind me, because this is a profession. And the way that you learn is through mentoring from people who have been there before. This is how I'm paying my debt to when I was sat in your seat looking at the guy who was teaching the class back then. So please feel free to call me or email me. We'll get together. Back to this quick situation. So we've got this little bugger here, and this is a 2-foot strip of land. Just to get the boat down. So I suggested my brother we do a lot line adjustment. Didn't go all the way back. It went back far enough to get the boat in there. So we're creating a parcel of land outside the Subdivision Map Act that's an illegal lot. It's not going to meet zoning. You find me any zone, any agency anywhere in California to let me create a 2-foot wide piece of property, not going to happen anymore. Now, the legal descriptions for my brother's property from now until eternity is going to be properly parcel 1 of final map together with the westerly 2 feet of parcel map of parcel 2 of said parcel map. The legal description for parcel 2 is going to be parcel 2 of final map accepting therefrom the westerly 2 feet. I submit to you that 2-foot strip, although never intended to be sold separately, is now a living, breathing, separate piece of ground. That's why lot line adjustments are exempted from the Subdivision Map Act, because we go to Pelican Bay if we don't have that exemption. There are agencies who will tell you, now, write me a meets and bounds description around that, to which I say, bull. Because now you're making me create another parcel outside the Subdivision Map Act and that doesn't meet the exclusion. Off to Pelican Bay with both of us.
I think when you do a lot line adjustment, you're supposed to erase the old lot line and call it.
No, that's a drafting thing. That's never going to be parcel 1 per the lot line adjustment. It's parcel 1 per the parcel map together with that 2-foot strip.
Don't they also sometimes do as amended by,
Yeah, they do a lot of things.
like parcel 1 of subdivision, as amended by lot line adjustment, such and such?
I don't know that I've heard that one. I have had a number of agencies ask me to write a meets and bounds around the resulting parcels.
But you wrote a new legal, you said parcel 1, including
Yeah.
the strip. So I think you're right, planners and everyone, not just planners, realtors, they want to see the bearings and distances.
Yeah.
They don't like these, oh, he just got a few words here, but it fully describes
Yeah.
what you've done.
Because with all due respect, there's nothing anywhere that says the legal description has to be understood by anyone. It has to be understood by surveyors. And a competent surveyor has to be able to put that on the ground. It has to identify a unique parcel of ground to a competent surveyor. It doesn't say anything about the bozo who just bought the piece of property or the planner.
Do they reassess the taxes on that?
Yeah, yeah. Now, the one thing that is not addressed in 66412D is a real problem, and it's a real problem, is the fact that Alan and Brian both have mortgages. They both have trust deeds. So, Brian gets into trouble. He loses his house. They foreclose. What's the bank going to take? Parcel 2 of the parcel map. End of story. And in every single case in the last 10 years that I can find, the courts say, yeah, because that trust deed was never reformed. And that's what you're holding as collateral. Flip side of that is Alan gets into trouble and the bank forecloses on my brother. What does the bank take? Parcel 1 of the parcel map. Now, because you haven't reformed the trust deeds, you got a 2-foot strip of land in the middle there that's an illegally created, well, it's a legally created illegal parcel. Crap.
So is this being addressed with, the machinations on how to switch this section?
We're trying, but it's very, very difficult to do.
I would think so. I mean, it was a well-intentioned, but so many things are well-intentioned.
Because here's another deal. Let's say I own both of these parcels. And for whatever reason, there's a hill there or something, and I decide moving that line over makes it easier to build 2 houses on there. Oh, crap. I can't deed property to myself in California. That's fraud. Now what? Well, in some agencies say you can't do a lot line adjustment if you own both pieces of property simply because you can't convey property to yourself. Other agencies kind of look sideways, wink, wink, nod, nod, nudge, nudge. We'll use a straw man, get the title company involved. They buy one of the property parcels for $1. Then at the end of lot line adjustment, sell it back. Everything's great. Here's a problem. I'm a smart guy. That's an underground storage tank that was used in the farm 50 years ago. I do a lot line adjustment and make sure the title company picks up parcel 2 for $1. They just stepped into the chain of title that the Superfund is going to nail their ass to the wall for $1. Wow. So, if anybody has any ideas, as chair of the committee, I welcome anybody's input. This is a screwed up section of the law. It's one of the most useful tools we have for fixing problems. And it's out of the jurisdictions across the entire state. I don't think that I have yet found 2 jurisdictions that handle them in the same way. Exactly.
One thing I'm begging for is that it be required that the legal description be written by a licensed surveyor.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, like I say, my county, my dread county,
Yeah.
there are abominations about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is a mess. This is one you should be relying on a professional to deal with. And the attorney is not a professional description writer. Now, I will tell you, and I'm probably one of the few guys who will admit it, my mother was a legal secretary, and she worked for Dick Ringwood back in upstate New York, and Mr. Ringwood was a real estate attorney. I know firsthand, real estate attorneys do not write legal descriptions. Legal secretaries write legal descriptions. I am very proud to admit that my mother taught me to write legal descriptions.
Was she also a surveyor?
No, she wasn't. She was just damn good at writing legal descriptions. And she knew about Waddell's book.
For those of us that work for governmental agencies, could you mention, because I love your idea on the conditional certificate of compliance in lieu of a resultant parcel description meets and bounds?
Well, even that has some problems, but it goes a long way along the line to doing something. The problem is that you still, even though you record a certificate of compliance, and a certificate of compliance, anytime the local jurisdiction has any question about the legality of a parcel, whether it's an entire section that has never been conveyed since it was patented, or down to that little piece that's left over after we've conveyed 3 parcels around it, or to this case here, the local jurisdiction can ask for what's called a certificate of compliance that says, we have to have the ability, the authority to take a look at this and determine whether or not this is a legal parcel. So we do this, I own both sides. The jurisdiction says, okay, we'll file, certificates of compliance on this so that now we know you've got 2 legally created parcels. The trouble is, the certificate of compliance isn't perfected until the deeds are also conveyed. And in my opinion, until the trust deeds are reformed. It goes a long way along the line, but it doesn't quite get there. I love the idea of a parcel map, but it's illegal to ask me to do a parcel map. You can't ask me to do that. I'm not sure how we're going to solve this. But we need to do something. Really quickly, material discrepancies. Many states have a statute of positional tolerance, and they tell you that you've got to have 1 part in so many, or it's got to be whatever or whatever. California, we do not register or provide certificates to land surveyors. We give them licenses. We consider them to be professionals, just like doctors, just like attorneys, just like CPAs. Y'all are on your own to determine what you believe is a material discrepancy. Now, if you turn around to me and tell me that 200 feet is not a material discrepancy, you're going to have a hard time finding 2 surveyors that agree with you. A 1-inch iron pipe in the ground as opposed to a 2-inch iron pipe, I've been told that by some jurisdictions that's a material discrepancy. I have to file a record of survey.
There was the field crew that run out a 2-inch.
Yeah. Yeah. We just cleaned out one of our survey trucks that came down from Boise. I've got rebar in there. 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/8, 5/8, 7/8 rebar. I've got tags or caps that will fit on the 1/2 inch, 5/8, and the 7/8 rebar. You're going to tell me that I have my map that says I've got a 7/8 rebar set, which I would never do because I don't believe plastic caps are durable monuments. And it turns out to be a 1/2 inch. We now got a material discrepancy. Bull. By the way, just a quick story, a final story. Civil engineer who, top-notch civil engineer, used to practice in Southern California around Temecula. I was retracing the work. He had retraced the work of a previous LS who had set rebars with plastic caps on them in the bush. And the civil engineer came through And his description was found, what was it? Found substandard rebar with charred remains of plastic cap, reset properly with 1-inch iron pipe, proudly bearing a brass tag stamped RCE, And I thought, go, dude. And it was Jerry Stainer who approved that map, and I think Jerry probably laughed himself sick. So, any other questions, please ask. We're off the clock now, but thank you for being a great audience.
Ian, thank you very much. On behalf of CLSA, we got some gifts for you here.